Hello everybody, welcome to the Abbots Address. Today is Friday, July 31st, 2015. So we've been having some conversations about the roots of dispute and how that happens in a Sangha and what the roots of disharmony can be. And last time we talked about ill will. And as an example of ill will, I brought up the case of Devadatta, who was the Buddha's sort of antagonist, so to say. This is a person who studied and attained some depth and was a disciple of the Buddha, but then felt envy and jealousy of the Buddha's position, and then formed a thought of ill will against the Buddha and tried to assassinate him, actually, and created a schism in the Sangha, a splitting, which eventually was resolved. But in the meantime, it was quite a kind of a pain in the butt for the Buddha, I'm sure. So, interestingly, some people asked a question that occurred to me too, but a number of people sent me in the question and said, well, wait a minute now, hold on. You said that Devadatta is supposed to be this very evolved, highly skilled meditator that had these, even got so far as to have spiritual powers. So what are those, and then how could someone who got that far along goof up so badly? You know, how about that? I mean, isn't he supposed to have been past that? How can somebody with such obvious troubles, get that far along in the path, or shouldn't he have been cured of that stuff by then? All kind of comments like this. So interestingly, it seems that the Buddha himself gave a talk about this. There's a sutta, Mahasaropama Sutta. Pali is very difficult for me. Pali feels to me like Sanskrit with cotton in your mouth. You put cotton in your mouth and try to pronounce the Sanskrit, and that's basically what Pali sounds like to me. Anyway, that aside, in this sutta, the Buddha was giving a discourse to his community after Devadatta had left. And there was a number of people in the community that were disheartened by Devadatta's leaving, and that he would intentionally cause a split in the community and try to hurt the Buddha. And it was upsetting for people because Devadatta was thought of as a senior student at that time, thought of as a senior practitioner, and how could this happen? So the Buddha gave a discourse to explain this, and it's called the Simile of the Heartwood. The Simile of the Heartwood. Now, to understand this, you have to have a little bit of context, and that in India at that time, when the Buddha was teaching, if your family needed a new chair or table or something like that, one didn't go down to the shop and procure one unless one was extremely rich. I mean, money was kind of a newish kind of deal. The banking system was emergent. So shops were kind of a rarity. It wasn't like that. What happened was you went out and got some wood and you built a chair or you built a table, okay? So the simile that the Buddha uses is talking about different qualities of wood. And he talks about several different qualities of wood that can be used and several different places that a practitioner can be stuck and become intoxicated and become misdirected. And so the first one of these, I have some notes here to help me stay on track here, is that imagine a person saw the truth of suffering in their lives, says the Buddha in this sutra. He's explaining this, and he says that they decide to join the Sangha. They see that suffering has no bounds, and they want to be free of it, so they join the Sangha. And in joining the Sangha, they achieve some amount of gain, some amount of honor, some amount of renown. And that in gaining this honor and renown, that monk, that practitioner becomes kind of intoxicated with the fact that they became known. They made the move, they joined the Sangha, they became a religious person, a wandering ascetic, and everybody in their hometown thinks they're a rock star. And they get intoxicated by that, and they like that, and they become satisfied at that point and stop their training. And then the Buddha says this would be like, imagine someone who decides that they need a new chair, and they go out to the woods intending to get heartwood, which is the center of the tree. It's the center part of the tree where the wood is really good for building stuff. Not that I've ever built anything like that. I don't know. That's what the Buddha tells me. I'll go with it. So the man went out to search for Heartwood, and what he did is he saw a tree, and he saw all the leaves and the twigs, and he collected up all the leaves and the twigs of the tree and brought them home to make his chair. So then the Buddha asked, is that going to work? Is the monk going to get, is this householder who's building a chair going to get the result he set out for? And the answer is no, you're not going to build a good chair out of twigs and leaves and stuff. And so the Buddha makes an equivalency. Someone who becomes taken with fame or renown or status in some way, they've settled for the leaves and the twigs, and they ain't got it. And then he goes further, and he says, now imagine that a person joins the Sangha, and they're not satisfied with the gain and renown of having joined the Sangha, but they attain moral discipline. So they attain the precepts, and they attain the level of correct behavior, see. And they look around and they say, look, these other monks here, these other practitioners, they don't have moral behavior. I've got moral behavior, and I'm the stuff. And so at that point, boom, they become satisfied, and they stop their training. And the Buddha says, imagine now that would be like our householder friend who's going off to build a chair for the family, and he sees past the twigs and the leaves, but he collects all the outer bark of the tree. And he collects all the outer bark of the tree, mistaking it to be the heartwood, brings it back home and tries to make the family a chair. Is his outcome going to be achieved? And the answer is no, of course not. So in the same way, the practitioner or the monastic who becomes satisfied with having attained a kind of a moral discipline and stops there has not attained the training. That's sort of like a holier-than-thou Puritanism or something. Not okay, not acceptable at all, not the real deal. So then the story goes on. He says, imagine a practitioner joins the Sangha, and they attain the honor and renown of joining the Sangha, okay, and then they attain the moral disciplines, so they're recognized for what they're doing, and they attain the moral disciplines of what they're doing, but they're not satisfied with that. They keep going because they enter because they see suffering is real, and they want to be free of suffering and attain liberation. That's why they enter. So they get past the fun of joining and a new thing to wear and a new me, whatever, and then they get to some kind of moral discipline and functioning. They're not satisfied. They keep going, and they attain concentration. They attain samadhi, or the jhana states. So they attain a level of a concentrated mind. See, so now this person maybe gets that far along, and then they say, look, I've got a concentrated mind, and all my friends here in the Sangha, their mind isn't as concentrated as mine. They're all scatterbrained and all over the place. I'm the stuff. And at that point, the story's obvious now. They stop training, they become satisfied and intoxicated with their attainment of a concentrated mind, and their training stops. And they don't attain the final end, which is the end of the resolution of suffering. They don't get it. And then the Buddha switches back to the simile and says, hey, that's like a householder that goes out to build a chair, and he's not satisfied with twigs and leaves. He gets it. He's not going for the outer bark. He gets that. He goes further and he gets the inner bark of the tree, whatever that is. He gets the inner bark of the tree, so that maybe there's another layer of bark. I don't know, whatever. The next layer in of the tree. And he says, now I have it. And he goes back to make his chair, and the chair doesn't work. Because it's the same thing. It's not the heartwood. It's closer. It's more inner. Concentration is more inner than the morality, more inner than the recognition of joining the practice, but it's not the real deal yet. See, goes back to the story of the person joining the Sangha. Now this time, the person gets past the recognition of joining and the moral discipline and attaining the concentrated states of mind, and now this person attains knowledge and vision. Knowledge and vision. So what is knowledge and vision? Well, in traditional Buddhist teaching, in early Buddhist writings, when the Buddha was about to achieve his realization, he attained three super knowledges, or supramundane awarenesses. The first one is his own experiences of former births. And then the second one is being able to look into other beings and see their former births, and and how karma plays out in that person's life. And the idea is that these two super knowledges give the Buddha the context to be able to teach completely well and to completely understand cause and effect, rebirth, and karma. Okay. Now the third super knowledge, by the way, is the real thing, which is full, complete liberation. And so together those are called the three super knowledges. Okay, the three of them. Now it's said that actually that those three super knowledges were come up with because there was a series of Brahmin at the Buddha's time, this is interesting to me, that would claim that they were masters of the three Vedas, because there were three primary Vedic texts at the time. So like if you were really super duper high level Brahmin, you would have attained knowledge of these three Vedic texts. And so they were called the triple knowledge Brahmins. And so some people speculate that the Buddha came up, or the Buddhist Sangha came up with here's the three super knowledges of the Buddha way. They're not just memorizing your three different Vedic holy books, but they're actually these knowledges. That could be. Anyway, that is the level at which Devadatta is said to have attained. So he's said to have been able to see into his own former births, and to be able to see into the former births of other beings and how karma would play out for them. And even with that, when the Buddha goes to the next story, or the simile, and carries the thread forward here, he says, now this would be someone who goes all the way in and gets past the leaves and the twigs and gets past the outer bark and the inner bark and gets to the sapwood, which is wood that's outside the heart of the tree, but it's still wood, but it's the sapwood, and he collects that and tries to make it. And it's not suitable, and it's not the complete thing. It doesn't give one complete relief of suffering. So there's many places in the suttas where the Buddha encounters, let's say, a Brahmin who can walk over water, and the Buddha is intensely not impressed and is rather underwhelmed by that, because that kind of thing doesn't actually produce the alleviation of suffering at all. The Buddha dismisses this kind of thing. And so here, the Buddha is saying to his disciples that, look, I know Devadatta got pretty far along as far as you all might be able to tell, but it's not the real thing. And at that level, he became intoxicated with his capacities and powers, his abilities to influence people. I mean, if you think about it this way, if you want to think about it literally the way it's written, that's fine with me. Okay, fine, I can't prove that that's not true. But another way to think about it is that if someone attains, to bring it back into more Zen kind of terminology, if someone has an initial kensho, if someone has some insight into the great matter, there's a certain kind of spiritual power that comes along with that, or a spiritual presence is even a better word to say it. And there's been quite a few people who declare themselves teachers when they're not, who actually have had some insight into the great matter. And it's because of this some insight into the great matter that they're so compelling to people who've had no insight into the great matter. See? So it's like there are certain figures that will go nameless here on this video that had some insight but not full and complete all the way through awakening as the Zen school would define it, and they broke away and started their own thing, and it's the same deal. Sadly, I mean really sadly, this pattern has played out since the very beginnings of the Buddhist impulse, the very beginnings of the teaching. It's astonishing to me, but it shouldn't be. I mean, it's as common as mammals and dirt, apparently. So, there we are. That was his explanation for Devadatta and what happened. Look, it can happen. You can get some insight and go rogue. You can always pull the Darth Vader move. You always can. And it's a complete drag, see. Because what happens is you get that far and you stop training and you don't get what you initially set out to achieve, which is the alleviation of suffering. And in our bodhisattva way, the ability to alleviate suffering from others. What you've got is an interesting party trick. Not good enough. So now the Buddha continues the story and he says, look now, finally, come back home with me now. Imagine someone joins the community, they realize suffering is real, they want to be free from suffering, that's the intention, they set out to realize this, and they go through the renown, the moral discipline, the concentration, knowledge and vision, fine, and they finally attain awakening. They attain perpetual emancipation, the way the translator has it here, Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. I would say they attain awakening. They attain actual insight into the nature of reality, integrated with all the stuff that came before it. Now, in Simile, that's like the guy who sets out, the woman who sets out to make herself a nice chair for the family. She goes to the woods, she finds a good tree, she goes past the twigs, past the, outer bark, past the inner bark, past the sapwood, and gets right into the heartwood, the heart of the matter. The heart of the Dharma, the heart of things. And there she finds the real wood. This wood is real because it's the center and it's strong and it's something that she can take back and she can build with and realize that the materials are sound. The materials are strong. Her efforts will not be in vain. She can make the chair and it's going to be an awesome chair, see. So for us, all the way today, 2,600 years later, this story is really, it's like right now, okay? Let's, all of us, not be satisfied. Do not be satisfied with anything less than the full and complete true Buddha Dharma. I remember, this is a personal story of mine with my second teacher, Myotai Sensei. She's dynamite lady and a great teacher and a huge influence on myself and Doan, Reverend Doan. And there was a time when I was very early in my training, a couple years, maybe 5 years into my practice or something really young like that. And it was after a session and she was doing a Dharma combat, which is where everybody comes up in public and has an encounter with the teacher. And I remember she put something out there. I forget what the point was. I don't really recall, but I do recall thinking like, I got this point and I'm going to nail it out of the park. And I got in the line and a bunch of people were there ahead of me and they kind of didn't quite get the point of what she was trying to do, which was puffed me up like crazy because I knew I was going to get this thing. So I went up there and it was my turn and I proudly pronounced the point of the thing, and I responded beautifully, you know, and it floored me what she did. I will never forget this, you know. If Myotai Sensei is ever watching this, you know, endless bows to you. She looked me right in the eye, and I'm a young, cocky kid. I'm in my 20s, maybe mid-20s or early 20s, I don't know. You know, I thought I was a big deal because I had some sesshin under my belt and I'd been sitting for 5 years. Anyway, I present my thing, and she looks right at me, and she says, "Don't be satisfied." And it just went right through me. It was such not what I was expecting. I was expecting a pat on the head and a badge, or I don't know what. Man, I bowed. Thank you for your teaching. I went back and sat down, and I've been a different person ever since. You know. So let's all of us take Myotai Sensei's teaching to heart. Don't be satisfied. Don't get to a certain little thing and then say, okay, that's cool. It's not cool enough. You actually can go all the way down the rabbit hole and you really can achieve this in this very lifetime, and you deserve nothing less. It's all here. It's right here for you. So let's all dig in together and make it happen, make it real, and let's none of us be satisfied until we're all attaining the great way together. May it be so. Now, in terms of announcements, it happens to be that I'm at the temple today. You can see this is the temple. There's some here, there's some there. The temple, it's just a chunk of it. This is the main zendo, the main sitting area if you've never been here. And And so this weekend, there's 15, in fact, Jakai initiates coming out to the temple, and they're going to be spending the day tomorrow writing their understanding of the vows to take the precepts to become Buddhist and to be recognized and to get a Dharma name, and then eventually to have the right to sow the Raksu. And that retreat will happen in a week or so. So I'd ask you all to keep those initiates in your awareness and to please send them good intentions and good karma. May their discernment be strong and their hearts be open, and may they be present for themselves and each other this weekend. Then next week, I'm going to be leaving to go to the American Zen Teacher Association conference. It's the first time I'll have gone to one of those conferences. I'm very excited that my schedule allowed me to go. And I'm going to go. I think there's, I don't know how many, 20, some, maybe 30 Zen teachers from around the country. And I'm excited to go. And this is not just the Generation X one. This is everybody, but it's specifically Zen teachers. See, earlier this summer I went to a Mahasangha all lineage kind of thing, and then a Gen X all lineage kind of thing. But this one is the American Zen Teacher Association. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm sure I'll have something to report back when it's done. And then after that, we have our big Dai session of the summer. Edward S.B. Brown is coming in. Reverend Doan is going to be getting her Denkai transmission. There'll be a recognition of that, and all these initiates that pass through, if they're vetted in and pass through, they'll be sowing their Raksu and receiving the Buddha's robe, the lineage, and the Dharma name. So, big stuff coming up. Thanks, everybody. Remember, don't be satisfied.